teacher, and if children are learning what we hope they are learning in terms of standards and benchmarks. When you take a close look at the assessment that determines this so-called achievement gap or preparation gap, you begin to question the assessments themselves. To begin with, when you're talking about the reading, because the two assessments that are most used to determine the so-called gap are reading and math. When you look at reading, we look at assessments that are basically firmly rooted in Eurocentric cultural experience. If you come out of a white middle class community or a white upper class community, the tests are biased in that they deal with those nuances and those cultural experiences. Ed Hirsch, who is a prolific writer on education, proved that if you take a community such as South Florida that is firmly rooted and committed to football, if you take and you create tests that test nonfiction literacy, fiction literacy, poems, if you take and root those in that particular topic and give it to that community, they're going to do better on standardized benchmarks, such as main idea, such as making inferences. They're going to do far better than if you give them the same benchmarks on a topic such as ice fishing, tobogganing, skiing. So the tests are culturally biased. That's a problem. We're dealing with assessments that do not really adequately assess the students. A gentleman in Central Florida right now, who's a school board member in Orange County, he decided he had to figure out why in the schools that were in his district, you have all these children, 3,000 that are sitting in remedial reading classes because they can't pass the reading assessment. You've got 30 teachers in his district that are teaching these remedial reading classes. And as he can remember, he's about my age. I'm not going to tell you how old that is. And he can remember never before has there been these many people that are deemed inability to read people. So he decided to explore himself. He took the test himself. Now this is a gentleman that deals with complex budgetary issues. He deals with contracts. He has to read these things. He himself, when he sat for the assessment, scored 62%. He would have been assigned remedial reading. So he began to question this. He's going around the state, he's discovering that students that are sitting in advanced placement courses, that are sitting in honors courses, students that read Shakespeare for pleasure are sitting in remedial reading classes. So we have to begin to question the assessments itself. They are not really demonstrating who is proficient and who is not proficient. Again, they are culturally biased. They are rooted in schema and background that is akin to, what can I say, it's dealing with what your experiences are, how you are growing up, where you're growing up, and if you're not growing up, again, in that particular cultural experience that is white middle class to upper middle class, you are at a serious disadvantage. We also have the question of preparation when we think of why there is supposedly an achievement gap. Dr. Ben Cowan's a professor at Florida International University, conducted a study, and he noticed there was a correlation between students that show up regularly and how well they do on assessments, and students that do not show up regularly. So when you have students that, for whatever social conditionings that are going on in their particular world, in their particular communities, that are not showing up on a regular basis for instruction, they're at a disadvantage. And this is why we need an emphasis, I think, on wraparound services that was addressed. You have to be able to support the community to make sure the students are showing up for instruction. So again, when we look at the so-called achievement gap, you got two problems here. Assessments that are not really assessing kids, and you've got the problem of students being able to show up for instruction. Right now in New Orleans, 85% of those schools are charter schools now, but you have a major problem with kids showing up. They've destroyed the community school structure, so you have kids that live way over on the east side of town that have to get way over on the west side of town every day. And it's ruining the ability for the students to be able to be in school and show up for instruction. The charter as situation has other problems as well, which some of our other panelists will address. But when we think of the problem with achievement, double-edged sword, assessments that are not quality assessments, and the ability for students to be there to receive instruction. Thank you.